All right, so we've got a ton of notes and articles all about making your English sound more natural, less like you're reading from a textbook.
Yeah, it's really interesting how many people get so focused on grammar and vocab lists,
Right.
but they kind of miss that extra something that makes someone truly fluent.
Okay, so let's unpack that extra something then. What are we missing?
Think of it like music. You can learn all the notes on a piano, but without rhythm and melody.
Yeah.
It's not really a song, is it? Speaking naturally is kind of like mastering those subtle elements that native speakers just do without thinking.
So what exactly is this native speaker formula? Is it just about having a perfect accent?
Actually, it's more than that. Our sources point to 6 key elements. Pronunciation is obviously a big one.
Right.
But there's also intonation rhythm, how you connect words together, where you put the stress in a sentence.
They don't forget about body language and confidence. That makes a huge difference too, right? Even when I know what to say, I sometimes still feel awkward actually saying it.
You've hit on a really important point. Confidence is a huge part of sounding natural. And the good news is our sources have a bunch of practical techniques for sounding and feeling more confident. And remember, everyone has an accent. Embracing yours can actually be a strength.
Okay, I definitely want to hear more about that later. But first, I'm really curious about this 1-hour action plan you mentioned. It breaks down specific activities for each of these elements, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It really focuses on deliberate practice, which is way more effective than just passively listening to podcasts or whatever. For example, they suggest starting with 10 minutes of imitation practice.
Okay.
Find a short audio clip from a native speaker, like a podcast or a TED Talk, and just listen and repeat. The goal is to match their pronunciation and rhythm as closely as possible.
I love that it's so specific, not just practice, but do this for 10 minutes. What comes after imitation?
The next 10 minutes are all about connected speech.
Okay.
This is where things get really interesting because it's about how native speakers actually blend words together. Like want to becomes wanna, going to becomes going.
Right.
It's about understanding the music of the language, not just the individual notes.
Yeah, those contractions always trip me up. But I can see how mastering them would make you sound so much more natural.
Absolutely. And it's something that learners often overlook. They focus so much on pronouncing individual words in isolation. But connected speech is what makes a language flow smoothly and effortlessly. It's what makes it sound like music to our ears. So after those 10 minutes of connected speech practice, the plan suggests spending the next 10 minutes on word stress and intonation.
Can you give me an example of that? It sounds kind of abstract.
Sure, think about the sentence. I can do it. If you emphasize the word can, it comes across as confident, assertive. But if you emphasize do, it becomes more about the action itself, like a pep talk.
Wow, that's fascinating. Just changing the emphasis totally changes the meaning. I never really thought about it that way.
And native speakers do it instinctively without even thinking about it. So practicing word stress and intonation is all about becoming more aware of these subtle shifts and how they impact what you're trying to say. It's like adding punctuation to your speech, making it more dynamic and engaging.
Okay, so we've got imitation, connected speech, and word stress and intonation. That's 30 minutes of our power hour. What's next?
This is where we take things up a notch. The next step is shadowing.
Okay.
This is where you choose a video or audio clip of a fluent speaker and try to speak along with them simultaneously without pausing.
Ooh, that sounds challenging, but I bet it's super effective for getting the rhythm and flow down. It's like syncing up your speech with theirs.
Exactly. It's a workout for your tongue and your brain. You're not only focusing on individual sounds and words, but also on the overall melody and pace of the language.
Okay, so we've got imitation, we've got connected speech, word stress, intonation, and now this shadowing thing. We're really building up our skill set here.
And to really solidify those skills, after 10 minutes of shadowing the action plan, suggests you spend the next 10 minutes recording yourself, speaking for a minute, and comparing it to a native speaker.
That's a great way to pinpoint areas for improvement. I think a lot of people avoid recording themselves because it can feel awkward, but it's so valuable to hear yourself the way others hear you.
Absolutely.
Right.
It can be a bit of a reality check, but it's crucial for identifying those blind spots that we might not be aware of when we're just speaking in our heads. And finally, you wrap up the hour with 10 minutes of real-life application. Have a conversation with a friend, a language partner, or even just talk to yourself.
I love that. It's all about putting those skills into practice and just getting those words flowing out naturally.
Precisely. The goal isn't to memorize a bunch of rules or to sound exactly like a textbook recording. It's about developing fluency through consistent practice and repetition. It's about building up that muscle memory so that speaking English becomes as natural and effortless as breathing.
Okay, so we've got this incredible 1-hour action plan for tackling all those subtle elements that make someone sound like a native speaker. But what about vocabulary? Do I need to memorize the entire dictionary?
That's a great question. And luckily, the answer is no. You don't need a massive vocabulary to sound natural. In fact, focusing on using common phrases naturally can have a bigger impact than memorizing obscure words you'll rarely use.
So instead of saying, that is very good, I could say, that's awesome.
Exactly. Simple swaps like this can make a huge difference in how natural and fluent you sound. It's about picking up the nuances of everyday speech, the little expressions that native speakers use without even thinking about it.
And let's not forget about phrasal verbs, those little combos that trip everyone up, but mastering them makes you sound so much more native.
Absolutely. Phrasal verbs are a cornerstone of natural-sounding English. Instead of saying learn, you could say pick up. Instead of meet unexpectedly, you could say run into. These seemingly small changes make a world of difference.
Okay, this is super helpful. So we've got the techniques down, we've got some vocabulary tips, but can we circle back to that confidence piece for a second?
Of course, confidence is key. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Because even with all the practice in the world, some people still feel nervous or self-conscious about their accent.
Well, the first thing to remember is that mistakes are inevitable. They're part of the process. Don't be afraid to experiment, to have fun with the language, to let your personality shine through.
That's such a crucial point. It's not about being perfect. It's about being authentic. It's about bringing your own unique voice to the language.
And one of the most powerful ways to do that is by really mastering those little nuances of everyday speech. We talked about contractions earlier, but what about all those common phrases and idioms that native speakers use all the time?
Yes, those can be so tricky, but they add so much color to the language.
They do. It's like the difference between plain rice and a perfectly seasoned biryani. Both will fill you up, but one is way more exciting.
That's a great analogy. Those phrases and idioms are like the spices that bring the language to life. They give it personality and that sense of, being in the know.
Right.
Okay, so give me some examples. What kind of phrases are we talking about besides the that's awesome instead of that's good thing?
Well, even simple greetings can be leveled up. Instead of just hello, you could say, hey, what's up? Or how's it going? It instantly feels more casual, more natural.
Right. And instead of just a flat goodbye, you could say see you later or catch you later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about tuning into the rhythm of everyday conversation, using those little phrases that signal you're part of the cultural conversation. Now, idioms can be a bit more challenging, but they're so rewarding to learn.
Oh, yeah, idioms. They trip me up all the time. I understand the individual words, but the meaning of the whole phrase just goes right over my head.
I think everyone struggles with idioms at first. It's like learning a secret code. But the more you expose yourself to them, the more you start to recognize the patterns and understand the logic behind them.
So instead of avoiding them, I should actively seek them out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask native speakers what they mean. Most people are happy to explain, and it shows you're interested in learning the nuances of their language.
Do you have any favorite idioms you could share just to get us started? Ones that are common but maybe not immediately obvious to a non-native speaker?
Well, one that comes up all the time is piece of cake. It means something is very easy.
So instead of saying that test was very easy, you could say that test was a piece of cake.
Exactly. It's more informal, more colorful, and more impactful.
Yeah.
It shows you're not just speaking English, you're getting English.
That's a good point. It's about expressing yourself, not just translating your thoughts word for word.
Right. And there are so many fantastic idioms out there. Another one I love is to hit the books. It means to study hard.
So instead of saying, I need to study for my exam, I could say, I need to hit the books. I love it. It's so much more expressive.
Exactly. And the more you learn, the more you'll find yourself naturally using them in your own conversations. It's like adding spice to your language, making it more flavorful and engaging.
Now, I know we've talked a lot about mimicking native speakers, but one thing that really resonated with me from our sources is this idea that accents are okay. It's not about erasing who you are, right?
Absolutely. One of the biggest hurdles for language learners is this fear of sounding different. But the truth is, everyone has an accent. It's part of what makes us unique. It's part of our personal story.
So it's not about trying to sound exactly like a BBC newsreader.
Not at all. It's about embracing your own voice, your own rhythm, while also developing clear and understandable pronunciation. It's about finding that balance between clarity and authenticity.
That's such a relief to hear. Sometimes I think people get so caught up in trying to sound perfect that they lose their own personality in the process.
Exactly. And ironically, that can actually make you sound less natural because it lacks that genuine human connection. When you try too hard to erase your accent, you can end up sounding robotic and unnatural.
Right. It's like trying to fit into a mold instead of celebrating your own unique shape.
I love that analogy. It's about owning your voice, your accent, and using it as a tool to express yourself authentically.
So how can we encourage learners to kind of embrace their accents while still striving for clear communication?
Well, one way is to shift the focus from accent reduction to accent enhancement. It's about refining your pronunciation so that it's clear and understandable while still retaining those unique qualities of your own voice.
I love that accent enhancement. It's like taking something that's already beautiful and just polishing it up a bit, making it shine even brighter.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that your accent is an asset, not a liability.
Okay. I'm feeling much more confident about my accent already. But what about fluency? How do we develop that smooth, effortless flow of language that makes someone sound truly native?
Fluency is the holy grail, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's all about putting all these pieces together, the pronunciation, the vocabulary, the grammar, and being able to use them spontaneously and confidently in real-time conversation.
Right. It's like riding a bike. You can learn all the individual skills separately, but until you put them together and actually start pedaling, you're not truly riding.
Exactly. And just like with riding a bike, fluency comes with practice, practice, practice. The more you speak, the more comfortable and confident you'll become. It's about building up that muscle memory so that speaking English becomes as natural and effortless as breathing.
Our sources emphasize the importance of speaking slowly and clearly, especially when you're feeling nervous. Can you talk a little bit more about why that's so important? Because my instinct is always to rush when I'm nervous. Like, I just want to get the words out as fast as possible.
I think we all have that instinct. But when we rush, our words tend to get jumbled and we end up mumbling or mispronouncing things. Speaking slowly and clearly not only helps our listeners understand us better, but it also gives us time to think, to process what we want to say.
That makes so much sense. It's like giving yourself a moment to breathe and gather your thoughts.
Exactly. And it also projects this sense of confidence and authority. When you speak slowly and clearly, it signals that you believe in what you're saying and that you want your listeners to understand and appreciate your message. It's about taking your time and owning your space in the conversation.
Okay, so speaking slowly and clearly is a big one. What other tips do we have for boosting fluency? Because I think a lot of people, myself included, get stuck in the cycle of knowing what they want to say, but not being able to say it smoothly in the moment.
Well, our sources mention using body language to boost confidence, and that plays a role in fluency as well. When you're relaxed and engaged, your body language reflects that, and it makes your speech flow more naturally. It's like your whole body is participating in the conversation.
So smiling, making eye contact, using hand gestures, all of these things can actually contribute to fluency.
Absolutely. It's all interconnected.
Great.
When you feel confident and engaged, it shows in your body language, your voice, and your overall delivery. It's about being present in the moment, both physically and mentally.
Okay, that's fascinating. So it's not just about what you say, but how you say it, the whole package.
Precisely. It's about bringing your whole self to the language and letting your personality shine through. It's about being authentic and engaging and letting your passion for the language come through in your words, your tone, and your body language.
Now let's talk about some practical ways to practice fluency. The 1-hour action plan we discussed earlier included activities like shadowing and recording yourself. What other techniques can listeners try?
One fun and effective technique is role-playing. Find a language partner or a friend and create scenarios where you can practice using the language in real-life situations.
Ooh, I love that. It's like improv for language learning. You're put on the spot and you have to think on your feet.
Exactly. It's a great way to get comfortable with spontaneous speech and to practice using different vocabulary and grammar structures in context. It takes you out of your comfort zone and forces you to use the language in a more creative and dynamic way.
What other tips do you have for finding language partners or practice opportunities? Because I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of people. They want to practice, but they don't know where to start.
There's so many resources available these days. Language exchange apps, online forums, local meetups. There's something for everyone. And don't be afraid to reach out to people you know who speak English.
Even if they're not native speakers, right? The important thing is to just get those words flowing.
Exactly. Every conversation is an opportunity to practice, to learn, and to grow. And don't forget about the power of immersion. Watching movies, listening to music, reading books, all of these activities can contribute to fluency in a more organic and enjoyable way.
I love that. It's about making English part of your life, not just something you study in a classroom.
Absolutely. The key is to find activities that you enjoy and that motivate you to keep practicing. Because when you're having fun, learning doesn't feel like work. It feels like play.
And remember, the goal is not perfection, but progress. Every conversation, every interaction is an opportunity to learn and grow.
That's so important to remember. It's a journey, not a destination. And the more you embrace the journey, the more enjoyable and rewarding it will be.
Speaking of enjoying the journey, I love how our sources emphasize the importance of keeping things fun. Can you elaborate on that a bit? Because I think for a lot of people, learning English can feel like a chore.
Absolutely. Learning a language should never feel like a chore. It should be an adventure. It should be about exploring new worlds, connecting with new people, and expanding your horizons.
It's about finding ways to make it personally meaningful, right?
Exactly. If someone loves music, they could try writing songs in English. If they're a movie buff, they could watch their favorite films with English subtitles. If they're a foodie, they could try cooking from English language recipes.
I love those ideas. It's about finding ways to integrate English into your passions, your hobbies, your everyday life.
Exactly. The possibilities are endless. And when you're having fun, you're more likely to stick with it and see results. It's about turning learning into a joyful experience, not a tedious task.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from pronunciation and vocabulary to confidence and fluency. But I think one of the most important takeaways is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to mastering natural-sounding English.
Absolutely. It's about finding what works best for you, embracing your individuality, and enjoying the process. It's about celebrating the beauty of diversity and recognizing that every voice has something unique and valuable to offer.
And remember, it's not about erasing your accent or becoming someone you're not. It's about enhancing your communication style and letting your authentic self shine through.
Well said. It's about being yourself, expressing yourself and connecting with others on a deeper level. It's about using language as a tool to build bridges, to break down barriers, and to create a more understanding and compassionate world.
Now, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge. Think about one specific area of English speaking that you'd like to improve. Maybe it's your pronunciation, your fluency, or your confidence.
And then ask yourself, what's one small step you can take today to start working toward that goal? It could be as simple as practicing a few new phrases, listening to an English podcast, or having a short conversation with a language partner. Remember,
every journey starts with a single step. And the sooner you take that step, the sooner you'll be on your way to unlocking that natural-sounding English you always dreamed of. You know, as we've been going through all these techniques and tips, it's really made me realize something important, something we maybe haven't talked about directly.
Yeah, what's that?
Self-awareness, like being aware of your own strengths and weaknesses and habits and quirks and how you speak. I think that's got to be the foundation for really improving.
It's so true and so often overlooked.
Yeah.
Like you can't fix a leaky faucet if you don't know where the leak's coming from.
Exactly. So how can we help our listener become more self-aware about their English speaking?
Well, our sources are pretty much in agreement on this one. Record yourself speaking.
Yeah.
I know it can feel kind of awkward at first.
What?
Hearing yourself the way others hear you is like a real eye-opener.
Yeah, it's like holding up a mirror, not just to your words, but to your delivery, your pace, your everything. I bet a lot of people would be surprised by what they hear.
Absolutely. You might realize you speak too fast when you're nervous, or maybe you mumble certain words, or you say, and like, way more than you thought.
Right. And I remember that 1 hour action plan we talked about. It actually included a whole section for recording and analyzing your speech.
It did. That's because it's such a simple but powerful technique.
It really is.
And you don't need any fancy equipment. Just use your phone or your computer, record yourself for like a minute or two talking about anything, then listen back really critically.
So recording yourself is one way to boost self-awareness. What else can we do?
Don't be afraid to ask for feedback from others.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Find a friend, a language partner, a teacher, someone who can give you constructive criticism.
And I guess be specific about what kind of feedback you're looking for, right? Instead of just, how's my English? Maybe ask, can you tell me if I'm pronouncing the sounds correctly? Or do I use too many filler words?
Exactly. The more specific your questions are, the more targeted and helpful the feedback will be. And remember, feedback, even when it's pointing out areas for improvement, is a gift. It helps you grow.
It's true. It's like having a coach in your corner, helping you see your blind spots and cheering you on.
Yeah, and beyond external feedback from other people, think about your own internal dialogue. The way you talk to yourself about your English skills can have a huge impact on your confidence and progress.
Ugh, tell me about it.
Yep.
Sometimes I get stuck in this loop of negative self-talk. I'm like, I'll never sound like a native speaker, or my accent is too strong.
We all have those thoughts. But it's important to recognize them and challenge them. Replace those negative thoughts with positive affirmations like, I'm getting better every day, or I'm proud of myself for putting in the effort.
It's like we need to train our brains to focus on the positive, on all those little wins.
Exactly. It's about creating a positive and supportive environment in your own mind. Because when you believe in yourself, you're more likely to take risks to practice consistently and ultimately to reach your goals.
And speaking of resources, I know there's so much stuff out there for English learners. It can be overwhelming. What are some of your go-to resources, the ones that really stand out?
We've already talked about language exchange apps and online forums. Those are great for finding practice partners and connecting with other learners.
And there are so many awesome podcasts, YouTube channels, websites dedicated to English learning. It's amazing how much is out there, and a lot of it's completely free.
It is. And don't forget about those good old-fashioned textbooks and workbooks. They can give you a really solid foundation in grammar and vocabulary, which is still important even if we're focusing on sounding more natural.
Right. It's like having a toolbox with all the right tools. And then the secret ingredient, the glue that holds it all together, is consistency.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's not about cramming or staying up all night before a big presentation. It's about making English practice a regular part of your routine.
Like brushing your teeth or going for a walk.
Exactly. Find a time and a place that works for you and stick to it. Maybe it's first thing in the morning during your lunch break or before bed. Make it a habit. Something you just do without thinking.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, I want to leave everyone with this one final thought, and it's a big one. Embrace the imperfections.
Yes, embrace them.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up trying to be perfect. But language is messy, even for native speakers. We all make mistakes. We stumble over words. We have those moments where we just can't find the right phrase. It's all part of what makes language so interesting.
That's actually really comforting to hear. Sometimes I get so frustrated with myself when I can't express myself perfectly. But you're right, it's those imperfections that make us human.
Exactly. They're like a fingerprint. They're unique to you.
Yeah.
So don't get down on yourself for making mistakes. Laugh at them, learn from them, and keep going.
Because in the end, it's not about sounding perfect. It's about connecting with other people, sharing your ideas, and experiencing the world in a more meaningful way. And that's something worth working towards, no matter what your accent is or how fluent you are. So to all our listeners out there, go practice, have fun, and enjoy the journey.